Do you know who I am? I'm kind of a big deal.
Welcome to Overtime with Dr. Michael Jacobs. I'm Chip Franklin, where we talk, well, a little bit more about hopefully stuff you love. One of the things about the Orioles is trying to find the right pitcher. And I know that Mike has said this before, and I think you've said this too. It's hard. It's a real crapshoot sometimes when you get a guy, you don't know if he's injured or not. We were going to move on this Jeff Hoffman guy. And then he didn't pass. He didn't pass a physical? Or we just didn't like what we saw. What happened there?
He certainly would have passed a physical. From what I've read, it's very similar to the Aaron Seeley situation I described earlier. All of these pitchers, lots of innings, throw hard. Their MRIs are not normal by the time they're over 30. So you learn to live with, well, that's normal for a 30-year-old pitcher. That's pretty good for a 30-year-old pitcher. Obviously, in this particular case, there was something there they thought that was a little worse than they expected. And as I said in the previous part of the show, being a small market team, if they offered him a 3-year contract, they seem to have pressure to feel that he will be at top level for 3 years. And they obviously felt that he can pitch now. He pitched well last year. And I don't think there's any question he passed a physical. But I think they were projecting that there might be some higher risk of degradation down the road. And since they're a small market team, so to speak, they felt they probably tried to do what we did with Seeley, which was maybe go from 4 years to 3 years plus an option or something like that. And obviously, the player was affronted by that. And in his back pocket, he clearly had a comparable offer. So he chose to take that pathway. So it wasn't that he would have failed the physical. It clearly was a case of they felt that the longevity of the contract might not fit the amount of money they were paying, and they didn't want to risk having him be relatively less than ideal. I think it was a 3-year deal, which isn't all that long, frankly. But they felt sensitive about that. That also happened to the Orioles with Balfour when he was coming off a strong year, but they had concerns about his imaging and try to go from 2 years to 1+1. And Balfour went very vocal in the papers. And in fact, the Tampa Bay doc unprofessionally called out our doc, which wasn't me at the time, for making a bad decision. And in fact, he signed another $8 million contract with Tampa. In the first year, he was mediocre. In the second year, they cut him.
Well,
so sometimes you get it, sometimes you don't.
Well, Hoffman signed for the Blue Jays for 3 years for $33 million.
Right.
And do you think the Orioles were offering about the same amount, or were they less or more? Do we know?
I certainly do not know, but I would say it was probably comparable. Yeah. And I would say the player probably thought the Orioles had a better team, so he felt he was more likely to go far in the playoffs with our team. I mean, that's usually what they do. Most of the players don't particularly like Canada, and as you know, the tax situation up there degrades their money a bit.
He did an interview afterwards and talked about he came in and closed the game after they scored that run on the top of the 10th and blew a kiss towards the Orioles dugout, and he was asked about that. Catch this.
I think I remember you saying that there might be a little extra juice for some of the games against Baltimore or Atlanta. Was that the case today?
When I'm thinking about the games before the games are being played and stuff, yeah, obviously that's definitely in my head. But once I'm in the game, I'm focused on making pitches. If you get starting to think about all that stuff while you're out there, things tend not to go well.
Was it something that you were thinking about at all after the outing? It looked like you blew a kiss towards the Baltimore's dugout.
Definitely. I'm excited when we win. Like I said, it's hard to win in this league, and we put together a good second half of that game, and it was nice to get that one.
It's interesting. You said something about players not liking to go to Canada. I never heard that before. Is that so? That's a deal that the Canadians got. Toronto plays pretty well. We know that the Rogers people have a lot of money. But have you heard that before? Are there other cities that you know of that guys just don't want to go to?
Well, everybody wants to play in Texas because there's no income tax, and Dallas is a great city. And so there are certain places that are preferable, but I think the players pretty much put a premium on winning. So people will go to Toronto when they're a good team, and they'll go when they're signed there for sure. But in general, I've heard players compare deals, and they'll say, well, Toronto did this, but the tax situation was such that the money in Dallas was really better. So Toronto has a little bit of an uphill struggle up there. In addition, for the Latin players, it's a little more complex with the visa issues. There have been a few times where we've tried to bring up Latin players to fill spots, and we had some visa issues up there getting them in.
Well,
But
the Peter
it
Schmuck,
happens.
Peter Schmuck from the Baltimore Sun used to tell me that he talked to guys that said the wire hurt us from being able to recruit people just because it showed Baltimore in such a horrible light. And you and I both know women have the ultimate decision. The wives do in these deals, right? So if
I can think of a case where I think would have had a player who would have put us over the top in '97, who was a fantastic player, and everything was set, and his wife wouldn't leave, so he stayed where he was. I'm aware of that.
Adam Jones used to say that. He goes that people don't realize that during this bargaining period for these, free agents, their wives are sitting there front and center, so on, how the school's there, where we're going to live, and I would imagine though, like if you played on the East Coast, the trips are possible for your family to maybe come along more frequently than they are if you're on the other side of the country from where your base is. I guess, a lot of these guys, though, they all come from everywhere from Texas to Oklahoma to California, and where you live is secondary to them when they're young. But again, when you have a family and all, it's a whole lot different. Last note on these injuries.
But one more thing on that, it's still the money. Nobody wants to play in, particularly in Seattle, because it has by far the most air mileage, and there's a lot more traveling out there. And similarly, apparently with the heavy air, a lot of the hitters don't feel like they're ball carries. But we all offered Nelson Cruz 3 years, and they offered him 4. And Nelson is something of a friend of mine. He's a wonderful person, and he wanted to stay in Baltimore. But the 4th year said, I'll go play in Seattle. It's a whole nother year. So pretty much it gets down to the money and the years.
Last question. You've watched Gunnar back now for a week. He looks good to me. Do you think he's 100% recovered?
I would think so. I think it's just hard to hit a baseball, and he has to get back in the groove. And again, because the team's not playing up to full potential now, they may be pitching around him a bit. Adley's average, I think, is down to 240. So they may feel that they can be a little careful with him. And I think actually the error he had that was somewhat disappointing, again, was just not taking enough balls. But he looks fine to me. And he's a big man, and he's a tremendous ball player. So I'm certainly not worried about Gunnar coming back. I just think most of our concerns are getting the pitching staff online and waiting to see, will Bradish bounce back enough to be a help after the All-Star game? Will Tyler bounce back enough to be a help after the All-Star game? Will Grayson be able to get back where he wants to be once his injury heals up and he gets back to what kind of mechanics he wants to use? I think the future of our team lays in those 3 people. All you have to do is tread water till the All-Star game and then hit the gas. And as you saw last year, we started at gangbusters and kind of petered out. So I think they'll be fine to the All-Star game. And then it's a matter of, are you going to get 3 fresh pitchers or aren't you? And if you do, they'll be a force.
Seems like the league has leveled out after some hot starts, except for maybe the San Diego Padres. Everybody else, the Yankees have come back down to earth a little bit after that big run, and we'll see. And I think a lot of people are hoping what you do, that the injuries get better in time for the second half push. Dr. Michael Jacobs on Overtime. Good to see you, Doc.
Do you know who I am? I'm kind of a big deal.